Revealed, the incredible honeymoon that transformed a cold mafia boss into a loving husband. Tony the Iceman Salerno stood on the porch of their cozy cabin, the crisp New Hampshire air biting at his skin. He'd spent his life guarding a heart wrapped in ice, molded by the brutal streets of South Boston. Now, every moment of their honeymoon with Lily felt like a challenge to thaw his frozen edges. Who could ever imagine a notorious mafia boss learning to love? He wasn't ready for this yet. Here he was, a man tangled in the sweet warmth of a schoolteacher who saw beyond the shadows. Inside, the fireplace crackled with a comforting glow as Lily stirred the pot of gourmet stew she'd prepared. She hummed a tune, a sound so foreign to him, yet utterly magnetic. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows across her face, making her look like an angel sent to chase away his demons. She turned, her eyes sparkling like sunlight hitting fresh snow. "Tony. Dinner's ready." He walked over, hype and apprehension mingling in his veins. He handed her an extravagant necklace, diamonds twinkling as brightly as her smile. But she furrowed her brow, her expression clouded with confusion. "Tony, this is beautiful," but she hesitated, her voice soft. "I want you to share your thoughts with me. Not just gifts." That comment landed hard. He could feel the weight of his past creeping back, and his father's empire was built on silence and strength. His upbringing taught him affection was vulnerability, a dangerous facade in his world. Each attempt to sprinkle their romance with gilded gestures felt like pouring salt on a wound. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. The tension cranked up that night. Memories of lost moments haunted him, of bloodshed, whispered threats, and the family he mourned. As he stared at the flames, the embers reminded him of the flickering hope Lily represented. Outside, the winds howled, mirroring the chaos brewing in his heart. Suddenly, the door swung open. Four masked figures burst in, their intentions clear. The bare walls echoed shots fired, the world he built came crashing down. In that heartbeat of terror, Tony clutched Lily, desperation pooling in his chest. Would he lose the only warmth he ever knew? As he raised his fists, facing dark shadows of his past, it dawned on him he could either cling to the cold world he was born into or fight for something he never thought he could have. The life of fear and control had led him here, to this moment of brutal truth. Was he willing to stand up, not just for survival, but for love? Caught between an empire of violence and the light that could lead him home, Tony trembled. Could a man forged in darkness emerge into brightness? As fists met flesh and the chaos erupted, hope flickered, threatening to ignite the path to his redemption. Tony swung into action, adrenaline surging through his veins. His fists flew like thunder, each punch echoing a lifetime of rage and regret. The men lunged at him, their masks shadowing any fear they might have felt. The moment felt surreal, a primal fight for survival. Lily crouched behind a nearby armchair, her breath quickening as she watched her husband grapple with the intruders. For a second, her whole world spun. One moment they were sharing dreams by the fire, and the next, they were tangled in a nightmare. "Tony," she shouted, voice cracking with fear. "Be careful." But he barely heard her. He was focused, a sharp instinct kicking in, instinct honed over decades. One attacker fell to the ground with a heavy thud as Tony's fist connected, the crack reverberating through the room. He moved like a tidal wave, his body commanding power he never thought he had, fueled by love and the need to protect the only person who could melt his ice. "Get away from him!" she yelled, clutching the chair for support, her heart racing. Her instinct screamed to run, but she stayed rooted. There was an urgency to be strong, to fight against the impending threat, to support him. Tearing free from the chaos, another masked man lunged towards Lily, only for Tony to dart in, intercepting the blow. They crashed into a coffee table, scattering books and trinkets. For each violent movement, it felt like time slowed, the world narrowing down to a struggle for the future, for a love blossoming amidst destruction. "I won't let them take you," he growled, barely recognizing his own thunderous voice. But in the midst of the skirmish, everything seemed to fall apart in a flash. A strong punch found its way to his cheek, sending him sprawling onto the floor. Pain shot through him, but he didn't stop. Scrambling back up, he caught sight of Lily's wide eyes filled with a mixture of terror and fierce determination. In that moment, he realized she was not just a spectator, she was part of this fight, this battle for their love. "Tony, watch out!" she cried again, just as one of the assailants advanced on her, reaching out, ready to strike. In sheer instinct, Lily grabbed a heavy ceramic vase from a table and swung it with all her might. The sound of shattering pottery rang in the air. The impact connected, the intruder staggering back in shock. Tony's heart soared. "That's my girl," he managed to shout as he charged forwards, knocking the attacker to the floor. They stood together, breathless, hearts pounding. The chaos faded, leaving just the two of them in the center of a world torn apart. Breathing hard, Tony turned to Lily. Her face glistened with determination, yet shadows of fear creased her brow. "Are you okay?" he asked, scanning her for injuries. "I'm fine. But we need to get out of here." Her voice was steady, even though her hands trembled. As they moved quickly to the door, a loud crash interrupted their escape. An unhinged third assailant. Panic surged as Lily tugged Tony's shirt. He felt a wave of fear wash over them both, but as he looked into her eyes, something inside him ignited. He wouldn't let their honeymoon end like this. Not when he was finally starting to understand what it meant to fight for love. The door was an inch away when the last masked attacker lunged, grabbing Lily. With a fierce roar, Tony whirled around, adrenaline pounding in his ears, grounding himself in this newfound desire to protect. It was his moment to change everything. With a sudden surge, he pushed his body forward, ready to risk it all. The weight of his past tried to reclaim him, but now there was something different. Now, he had something to fight for. As the chaos echoed around them, one thought rang loud in his mind. Would he be strong enough to break free from his past and hold on to his future? With the stakes rising, he lunged, heart racing, determined to reclaim his love and life. In that instant, everything teetered on the brink. Would this life of fear be all he ever knew? Or could he finally free himself and step into the light? Tony's heart felt like it was about to burst out of his chest as he barreled toward the masked man holding Lily. Time seemed to stretch, every second brimming with a mix of desperation and raw determination. He pushed harder, senses alive, narrowing his focus on the threat encroaching on his world. The attacker, caught off guard by Tony's sudden move, momentarily released his grip on Lily. It was a split second that meant everything. Without thinking, she dove to the side, creating some distance between herself and the intruder. Tony felt an overwhelming surge of relief wash over him, only to be replaced by rage as he locked eyes with the man who dared to threaten their love. "Your fight is with me, you coward," Tony shouted, the words fueled by years of pent-up frustration and a newfound purpose. He wasn't just defending his wife, he was reclaiming the life he had fought to build, brick by brick, after a past he had once thought would define him forever. With renewed vigor, he launched himself at the assailant, fists flying. Anger coursed through him, a fiery wave that shrouded his pain and regret. Each punch landed with purpose, a cathartic release, almost as if with every blow he was breaking chains that had long held him back. In the thick of the commotion, he heard Lily's voice. "Tony! Behind you!" Panic laced her words, cutting through the fog of violence. He turned just in time. Another figure was closing in behind him without mercy. Still in motion, Tony pivoted, grabbing the nearest object, a heavy wooden lamp. Without a second thought, he swung it with all his might, the satisfying crack as it connected at the side of the second intruder's head drawing a gasp from Lily. "Get down!" he yelled, urgency spilling from his lips as he realized they needed to make a break for it. The adrenaline coursing through his veins seemed endless, fueling his every move as he faced down the remaining attackers, now more frantic and aggressive. "You're not going to take her from me," he roared, forcing the last man back. But in that very moment, Tony felt a sharp pain in his shoulder. A knife from nowhere had pierced his flesh. The shock nearly knocked him off balance. But as he staggered back, Lily rushed to his side, her eyes wide with fear yet flickering with fierce determination. "Stay with me," she cried, gripping him tightly. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied through gritted teeth, plunging forward, refusing to falter. The strength of their connection formed a shield around him as he faced the masked intruder who had dealt the blow. They fought hard, but every move felt like it mattered more than just staying alive. It was a statement, a declaration of their love in the face of darkness. The final clash came with a devastating punch and a swift kick that sent the last attacker toppling over, his mask tumbling off, revealing a face twisted in fury. Breathing heavily, Tony glanced at Lily. Their eyes locked, and he saw the reflection of hope colliding with fear. "We have to go now," she urged, desperation in her voice as she pulled at his sleeve, guiding him toward the door. Together, they stumbled out into the cool night air, a world of confusion and terror still looming behind them. As the calm settled, they found themselves in the quiet hum of the moonlit street, pulse racing, heart pounding, united in survival. "What about the others?" Lily asked, worry creeping in. For a moment, Tony hesitated, the gravity of the situation settling in. The past, it's still lurking. But I won't let it control me. Not anymore. He took her hand, squeezing it tightly. They shared a moment of silence, the chaos of their fight lingered in the shadows of their minds. Exhausted but free, they stood there together, breathing in the reality of what they had just faced and the love that had kindled a fire inside them both. Little did they know, the battles ahead would challenge everything they had fought so hard for. The road to healing wouldn't be easy, and new threats were waiting in the wings. But as long as they had each other, perhaps they could face whatever came. "Next? Let us go home," he said softly. But even as he spoke, uncertainty gnawed at the edges of his heart. The sanctuary of their home hadn't felt safe tonight, and he could only wonder would they ever truly find peace. As they turned to leave, a shadow flickered in the alleyway, an eerie insignia painted on a wall, a reminder that battles were far from over. Would they find the strength together to confront the darkness lurking in the corners of their lives, or would it consume them whole? The cool night air wrapped around Tony and Lily like a comforting blanket, but it was laced with a tension that prickled at their skin. They forced their feet to move, away from the nightmare that had just unfolded. Each step felt like a deliberate choice, weighed down by the remnants of fear and adrenaline. "Do you think they're still following us?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but the edge of urgency was unmistakable. Tony shook his head, though he wasn't sure of anything. His hand tightened around hers. "I won't let anything happen to you, Lily. I promise." The words were more for himself than for her, a mantra to keep the panic from rising within. As they neared their house, a familiar sight that should have brought comfort, a sense of dread washed over Tony. Shadows darted in the corners of his vision, and with every creak of the building, he could feel the night closing in. Was it paranoia or just a natural instinct, honed from years of running with a dangerous crowd? Lily's phone buzzed violently in her pocket. Her fingers fumbled to pull it out, but the intensity of their earlier confrontation hung in the air. She paused, unsure if looking at it might somehow call back the darkness. "Just check it." "We can't be too careful," Tony urged. She nodded, and as she opened the message, her face fell. "It's from Sam. He says something about a meeting. He wants to know if we're okay." Sam? The name birthed a flood of memories, painful and chaotic. Sam was part of the old life, a ghost Tony had thought he buried deep. What does he want? Questions about tonight. He's worried. Says there's a lot at stake. She trailed off, uncertainty clouding her eyes. What does he know? Tony's instincts kicked in, years of experience in dealing with betrayals and the price of loyalty made his head spin. Didn't he say? Just that it would be safer to talk in person. As Lily looked up, the unease was evident in her features. "Do you trust him?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Not as far as I can throw him," Tony replied, trying to lighten the mood, but the weight of his own experiences burdened the jest. but he might know something. We can't ignore it. They stepped into their home, but it felt more like a trap than a sanctuary. The lights flickered overhead, casting bizarre shadows that danced against the walls. Tony paused, glancing back at the door as if the threat might materialize behind him. "Lock it," he instructed, the authority in his voice coming back as he pushed aside the raw fear that threatened to surface. Lily hurried to comply, the clicking sound of the lock a small buffer against the chaos of their world. "Do you really think we're safe? Even here?" she asked, doubt lingering in her tone. Tony hesitated, his heart heavy. "I should have never let you get caught up in all of this. It was my fight, but now I need you with me." Lily stepped closer, her eyes filled with the kind of fierce loyalty that defined their love. "Tony, together we make our stand. This is our home, and I'm not letting fear take that away from us." They shared a moment, the heat of their connection grounding them, pushing away the fear that lingered. But just as she reached out to touch his face, loud pounding echoed from outside, jolting them both back to reality. Tony's heart raced again. "What now?" Before Lily could respond, the thud of fists against the door repeated, urgent and desperate. "Tony! It's Sam. Let me in." The urgency in his voice sent a jolt through Tony. The man he had tried to escape was suddenly right at their doorstep. Torn between urgency and distrust, every heartbeat echoed in the quiet between them. "What do we do?" Lily whispered, anxiety sharp in her tone. "I don't know," Tony said, torn. But as the banging continued, he felt the weight of their past bearing down on the present. What kind of truth was about to be revealed? And would it bring them closer together or tear them further apart? The pounding grew more frantic, each strike sending vibrations through the door and into Tony's chest. Sam's voice didn't mask the fear laced within it. Tony could sense his own unease reflected back. "Tony! Please! I need to talk to you. It's about tonight. It's important." Lily's grip on his hand tightened. "He sounds desperate," she whispered, anxiety creeping into her words. "What if it's a trap? I don't trust him." "I should have buried that part of my life forever," Tony replied, his jaw clenching at the thought of Sam's return. But then he remembered their last conversation, the way Sam had leaned in and said there were enemies out there, enemies who were now looking for them. Was Sam coming to help or to destroy them? "I swear if this gets us caught," Tony hesitated, pulse racing with doubt. "We can't let anyone in unless we know it's safe." "Then what do we do?" Her face showed equal parts resolve and fear. "We listen." The fervent knocking paused, and in that silence, they heard Sam's heavy breaths through the door. It was almost pitiful. There was a vulnerability to it that gnawed at Tony's heart, the closeness of their intertwined histories weighing heavily on him. "Just let me explain, Tony. If you don't, we might all be in danger," Sam urged, the urgency rising in pitch. Lily shifted beside him, her expression a mix of compassion and caution. "He could be telling the truth. But you know him best. Do you think he's really on our side?" "I don't know," Tony admitted, letting the faith he had in himself and in his instincts drift away for a moment. "But there's no way we can live in fear, forever looking over our shoulders." Taking a deep breath, Tony stepped toward the door. He glanced back at Lily, searching her eyes for courage that he feared he lacked. "What if we do this together?" she said softly. "If it goes wrong, we stand side by side." "Okay. But if he makes one wrong move," he started, squeezing her hand once more. "You're ready?" "I was born ready," she responded, determination hardening her features. With a nod, Tony reached for the lock and turned it. The door didn't fly open, he just cracked it enough to peer outside, enough to gauge Sam's intentions. "What's going on?" "Talk fast," Tony said, eyeing Sam warily. Sam's eyes were wide, his panic palpable. "They know," he panted. "Tony, they know about you and Lily. They're coming. It's not just tonight anymore, it's bigger than that." Fear shot through Tony like ice water. The lingering effects of adrenaline made his heart race. "Bigger than what? What are you talking about?" You remember what I told you about the stakes? They're higher now. I overheard something at the club I shouldn't have, and they're on to you. I came as soon as I could. As Sam spoke, each word felt like a bomb exploding in the room, accumulating tension thick enough to cut with a knife. How can we be sure that you're not setting us up? Tony asked, still not convinced. Before Sam could answer, a shadow fell across the dimly lit doorway, drowning their small space in darkness. Tony's heart raced. What was that? He could hear footsteps approaching, heavy and deliberate, just outside their perimeter of safety. Get inside. Tony shouted, urgency spilling out as he swung the door open wider, yanking Sam inside. Lily's mouth fell open. Who is that? But her question was drowned out by a terrifying sound of voice booming from just beyond the porch. Sam. Let us in. We know you're in there. With dread pooling in his stomach, Tony locked eyes with Lily. What they were faced with now was more than a nightmare, it was a reckoning. And the question loomed heavily, would they survive the chaos or fall like so many others? The sound of that voice sent chills through Tony's body, as if ice water was coursing through his veins. They didn't just know him. This was a direct threat. His instincts screamed for action, but he felt paralyzed by fear as he loomed in the shelter of their tiny home. Who is it? He whispered harshly, urgency demanding answers. It's no one good, I promise you that, Sam replied, his eyes darting toward the window. Panic bubbled under the surface. We have to move. Now. Move? Where? Lily's voice was steady, but Tony could see the cracks forming behind her bravado. The adrenaline rushed through him, tugging at every sense, drowning out the confusion. Back through the kitchen. We can use the fire escape, Tony said. He felt the weight of his decisions, every moment stretching like a rubber band, ready to snap. Are you sure? Lily hesitated, glancing at Sam. He just got here. What if we leave him hanging? Right now, there isn't time to deliberate. Tony snapped, the tension fraying his nerves. We trust each other, remember? Sam nodded enthusiastically as if he sensed the urgency. Please, just follow me. I know ways to get out of here. They won't be expecting it. The pounding resumed, echoing like a clock counting down their time. Tony could feel the door wobbling slightly, as if the people outside were testing their resolve. Go. Tony shouted. He grabbed Lily's hand, pulling her toward the kitchen. They slipped past the cramped living space and ducked into the shadows. As they reached the back of the house, the faint streetlight barely illuminated their way. The escape route was murky, shadows rapidly turning into threats. Here. Sam whispered, pointing at the metal ladder that dropped from a small window. Tony's heart raced louder than the chaos outside. Lily's grip tightened around his arm. What if they see us? She breathed, fear weaving through her voice. Then we'll go fast. Just follow my lead, Tony assured her, forcing more confidence into his tone than he felt. With grim determination, they scaled the ladder. Tony was first, followed by Lily, and then Sam. Tony could barely breathe, the hollow clinks of their movements filling him with a sense of dread. Suddenly, a loud crash splintered the tension. The door had finally given way, and the voices burst through. We know you're in here. Where are you? The desperation was palpable, a dark storm closing in. Each heartbeat felt like a countdown, as if every second was being siphoned away. Hanging precariously from the ladder, Tony looked down. He could see the glint of flashlights sweeping through the rooms. Hurry! He urged, desperation creeping into his voice. They reached the bottom just as a shout echoed from above. They've escaped. Split up and find them. Tony shot a terrified glance at Lily, who was breathing heavy with a mix of fear and determination. Sam was ahead, sprinting toward the nearest alley. Come on! He called. This way. As they dashed into the darkness of the alley, the night air felt heavy with danger. They were officially on the run, and now there was no turning back. Every footfall echoed like thunder in his ears. Where do we go from here? Lily gasped, trying to catch her breath. Anywhere but here for now, Tony said, gritting his teeth. He could feel the walls closing in, the darkness loomed heavier than ever. They darted into a side street, hearts racing in sync with the urgency of their plight. The streetlights felt more like a spotlight on their shared fate. Tony turned to Lily, catching her anxious gaze. "I won't let anything happen to you. I promise." But as they moved deeper into the night, all Tony could think was whether he could keep that promise. Just then, a low engine roar ripped through the calm, and headlights flicked on, illuminating their faces. "What now?" Lily asked, panic flaring in her eyes. "Run!" Sam shouted, motioning them forward. But the looming vehicle seemed to predict their movement, closing in like a predator on prey. Would they get caught in a trap too deep to escape from, or could they turn the tide on their pursuers? The chase had only just begun, and their survival hung by a thread. Tony's heart raced as adrenaline surged through him. The car lights cut through the darkness, blinding and menacing. He grabbed Lily's hand and pulled her down a narrow alley, ducking behind a dumpster. The metallic smell of garbage filled his nostrils, but he barely noticed. All that mattered was staying hidden. "Stay quiet," he whispered, trying to keep his voice steady. Sam pressed himself against the cold, damp wall beside them, his breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. The muffled sounds of the cars crept closer, engines roaring like distant thunder. Tony glanced around. Where could they go from here? This alley felt like a dead end. "Do you think they saw us?" Lily asked softly, her eyes darting to the opening of the alley. "I don't know. I hope not," he replied, though the weight of uncertainty gnawed at him. He had always been the protector, the one who kept Lily safe from harm, but at this moment, he felt more like a liability. Just then, a shadow passed in front of the alley entrance, the silhouette of a man standing with a flashlight. "Check down there." A voice barked, cold and commanding. Tony clenched his jaw. It was clear they were being hunted. He turned to Sam and whispered, "We have to move now. If they find us here." The words hung heavy in the air, both of them knowing what that could mean. "Let us go." "There's a way out at the far end of the alley," Sam said, and Tony nodded, trusting him despite the fear coursing through his veins. They crept toward the end of the alley, moving like shadows. Every sound felt amplified: a distant dog barking, the rustling of leaves, the echo of their footfalls against the concrete. As they reached the end, Tony peeked out to see if it was safe. "Sprint for it," Sam urged, his voice barely above a whisper. With a nod, Tony took a deep breath. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. They bolted from the alley, running toward the street. The streetlights seemed to flicker ominously overhead as they dashed between parked cars. But just as they were about to cross the road, another vehicle came screeching around the corner. "Get down!" Tony shouted, ducking as the headlights illuminated the street. They pressed flat against the asphalt, the cool surface grounding them in reality. "What now?" Lily said, panic in her voice. Tony peered around. "We can't stay like this. If they come this way." The thought was suffocating. "Over there." Sam pointed to a set of bushes lining a nearby building. "We can hide until it passes." Without hesitation, they scrambled toward the bushes, ducking beneath the branches. The twigs scratched at Tony's skin, but he barely felt it over the pounding of his heart. The car slowed, the engine idling ominously, and they could hear footsteps approaching. "Damn it, come on," Tony muttered under his breath. His instinct screamed to flee, but part of him felt rooted in place, like if they moved, they'd be caught in the open. Holding his breath, he listened intently as the footsteps shuffled closer. "They must be around here somewhere," a voice growled. "They can't have gotten far." Tony could feel Lily trembling beside him. He squeezed her hand, silently promising that he would find a way out of this mess. The footsteps retreated momentarily, but Tony knew they wouldn't be safe for long. "We need to make a break for it, as soon as it's clear," he whispered, but then, a loud explosion of noise jolted them. A nearby dumpster had toppled over, creating a cacophony of clattering metal. "What was that?" Sam hissed, eyes wide. Only one way to find out, Tony replied, steeling himself. They had to act before they were found out. They had to keep moving. As the three of them crept to the edge of the bushes, a chilling thought settled in Tony's mind. Every choice they made seemed to tighten the noose around them. What if this was a trap? What if escape was impossible? And as they prepared to emerge into the unknown once more, a sinister laugh echoed in the distance. It sent shivers down their spines, hinting at the malevolence that lurked just out of reach. What now? Lily's voice trembled, this time laced with hopelessness. We fight, Tony said, resolving to protect them at all costs. But would fighting be enough to tip the scales in their favor, or was this the end of their desperate flight? Questions surged in his mind as they stepped back into the night, but one thing was clear, they were in deeper than they ever imagined. Could they find allies in a world so dark, or would they be alone in this battle? Tony's heart pounded in his chest as they slipped through the bushes. He could feel the weight of fear clinging to them like shadows. The laughter echoed again, closer this time, and it froze him in place. What was that? Lily whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. I don't know, he lied, forcing himself to keep his voice steady. He scanned the dark street, searching for any glimpse of safety. Stay close. Sam's shoulder brushed against his, both boys on high alert. They moved quickly but quietly, their feet barely making a sound on the asphalt. The streetlights flickered as they ducked from one pool of light to another. The silence was thick, each moment stretching out like a rubber band ready to snap. Where do we go? Sam asked, his eyes darting nervously. There. Tony pointed to a narrow side street that veered off the main road. It was dim, barely illuminated by the soft glow of a single flickering lamp. It was risky, but it felt like their only chance. They turned into the alley, hearts racing as they pressed on. The moment they were out of sight, Tony's instincts shifted. The laughter from earlier felt like a haunting specter, trailing them in the dark. I can't keep running forever, Lily whispered, her breath coming out in shaky puffs. The moment we stop, though, we'll be sitting ducks. Tony heard the weight of his own words. How long could they keep this up? The longer they stayed on the run, the closer danger loomed. As they moved deeper into the alley, Tony caught sight of an old, abandoned warehouse. The roof sagged, and graffiti marred every visible surface. It appeared neglected, but maybe that meant it could provide shelter. Let us check it out, he said, leading the way. They approached the entrance, the wooden door creaking ominously as Tony pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale and thick, tinged with the scent of mildew. Broken windows cast jagged shadows across the floor. Do you think anyone's here? Lily asked, peering into the darkness. We'll be safe for a minute, Tony replied, scanning the space. The warehouse looked empty, but the uneasy feeling in his stomach told him it wouldn't remain that way for long. They gathered in a corner and huddled close, trying to catch their breaths. Tony's mind raced. They had made it this far, but the thrill of escape had given way to panic. He felt the enormity of their situation like a weight on his chest. They needed information, a plan, and they needed it fast. We're sitting ducks here, Tony. What's the plan? Sam's voice was sharp, the urgency undeniable. Tony opened his mouth, but before he could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed outside, heavy and deliberate, echoing purpose as they approached. His heart sank, adrenaline kicking back in. Hide! He hissed, shoving them behind a stack of crates. They pressed against the cool wood, hearts thumping loudly in the silence. The footsteps drew closer, and Tony's throat tightened. It felt like a scene from a nightmare. Just when he thought they might be found, the shadows shifted, and the front door swung open. A figure entered. It was tall and imposing, a dark silhouette against the dim light. Check the back, the figure commanded, another voice from outside. Tony's breath stilled. This was it. They needed to act before whoever it was found them. He turned to face Lily and Sam, their eyes wide with fear. This was a crossroads. They could either run and risk being seen or wait and hope they wouldn't be found. On three, we bolt for the other side, Tony whispered fiercely. 1-2 but before he could finish, the shadows grew heavier, and the mysterious figure stepped further into the warehouse, revealing a face he could never have expected to see. Tony? His heart plummeted and hope began to flicker dimly in the depths of despair. This was not the time for surprises. Who was that? What did they want? What other secrets were hiding in the darkness? Tony? The voice was low, almost a whisper, yet it felt like a thunderclap in the stillness of the warehouse. Tony squinted in the dim light, trying to make sense of the figure standing before him. The slightly familiar features were blurred by the shadows, but as the figure stepped closer, Tony's blood ran cold. Is that you, Tony? It was Marco, the cousin he had lost track of years ago when their family ties took them in different directions. The last time they saw each other was at a family barbecue, where laughter was abundant and dangers were distant. Now, Marco looked different, more hardened, as if life had carved deep lines of experience onto his face. What are you doing here? Tony's voice came out shaky, confusion mixing with fear. He glanced at Lily and Sam, who were still tucked behind the crates, eyes wide with worry. Things are bad, Tony, Marco replied, lowering his voice. Really bad. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm trying to help. Help? How? The skepticism dripped from Tony's voice. He had trouble trusting anyone in this situation, especially a cousin wrapped up in their family's dark legacy. Marco looked over his shoulder, the shadows creeping in on him like predators. I know about the trouble you're in. I heard you running from them. He didn't need to say who them were. They both knew. Tony's heart raced. You can't be serious. You don't understand what's at stake. The weight of Marco's revelation hit him like a wave. This wasn't just a simple case of family drama, this was life or death. I know, Marco said hurriedly, his voice low. But I can get you out. We just have to move fast. What do you mean, get out? Sam interjected, stepping cautiously from behind the crates, the fire of curiosity overriding his fear. What's your plan? The docks. There's a boat that can get you out of the city. My friends are waiting nearby. But we need to act now. Marco's urgency pulled Tony in, but his instincts warned him to tread carefully. Lily squeezed Tony's arm, concern etching her features. What if it's a trap? We don't even know if we can trust him, she whispered, her voice just above a breath. Tony felt the pull of conflicting emotions. Marco was family. But family could also be a source of danger. A sense of desperation seeped into his thoughts, and he knew time was not on their side. Let's say we trust you, Tony said, looking directly at Marco, determination strengthening his resolve. What's the catch? Why are you helping us? He saw a flicker of pain cross Marco's face. 'Cause it's not just about you anymore. I owe a debt to your parents. They were good to me when I was lost. This is my chance to repay them, even if it means risking my life. How do we know it's safe? Sam asked, the doubt still thick in his voice. You don't. Marco's honesty cut through the panic. But I swear to you, staying here is death. You need to trust me, or whatever happens next will be worse. Much worse. Tony grit his teeth, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The laughter they heard earlier echoed in his mind, mocking, taunting. There was no time for indecision. All right, Tony said, voice steadying. Show us the way. As they moved towards the exit, Tony felt the weight of uncertainty on his shoulders, and everyone followed close. They pushed through the door, into the night, each step carrying them toward the unknown and the looming shadows of danger. Tony could feel his heart pounding wildly, hope flickering dimly as they crossed the threshold, but the night was far from over. Just as they stepped out of the warehouse, the sound of engines roared, and headlights flooded the alley. His stomach dropped. Run! Tony yelled, the urgency echoing with the raw fear coursing through him. Who were they now running from? And would they ever find safety in the midst of the chaos? The night air rushed past them as Tony, Lily, and Sam bolted from the warehouse, hearts pounding like drums in their chests. The headlights swept through the alley, cutting through the shadows like hunting wolves. "This way!" Marco shouted, leading them to a narrow path that spiraled away from the approaching vehicles. As they dashed forward, Tony's senses heightened. The gritty pavement beneath their feet felt like solid ground, their only hope in an unsettling world closing in around them. The roar of the engines behind them made their desperation palpable. Every step they took felt like a declaration they were done being hunted. "Keep moving," Tony urged, determination driving him. He clutched Lily's hand tightly, feeling her warmth, her spirit igniting his resolve. They navigated through the chaos until Marco skidded to a halt, gesturing toward a hidden opening in the shadows. "In here." They huddled inside a small alcove, panting heavily, listening intently as the sound of the cars grew louder. Sam cast anxious glances over Tony and Lily, his brow furrowed with worry. "What if they find us?" "They won't," Tony reassured, his voice gravelly yet confident. "Not if we're smart about this." For a moment, the chaos outside faded, and all that existed was the tenuous connection they shared in the gloom. The adrenaline buzzing in Tony's veins began to ebb, giving way to clarity. He realized they had to be more than afraid. They needed a plan. It was to strike first and reclaim some control over their destiny. As the engines revved and tires squealed outside their hiding spot, Tony turned to Marco. "You said you have a way out. We need to move, now." Marco nodded, but hesitation flickered in his eyes. "Right. The docks aren't too far. But they might have eyes on that route." "Then we'll change our approach," Tony said decisively. "We move as a team. We'll double back through the less traveled streets." He took a deep breath. "Time to fight for our freedom." The gravity of his words hung between them, solidifying their unity. They crept out of the alcove and navigated the dimly lit streets, every sound magnified in the oppressive stillness. Tony steered Lily closer, feeling her warmth shield him from the icy grip of fear. Together, they moved through the labyrinthine alleyways, hearts synchronized, driven by the urgency of survival. Suddenly, they halted at the sound of footsteps approaching. Tony held up a hand, breath hitching. "Stay still," he whispered. The others obeyed, holding their breaths, caught between fear and hope. As the footsteps passed, Tony felt a weight lift momentarily. But thoughts of the chasers invaded his mind. Who were they? What awaited them at the docks? An unquenchable fire lit within him. He was fighting for the life he'd built with Lily. Finally, they reached a weathered path that led to the docks. The salty air greeted them like an embrace. They could see the shadow of a boat bobbing gently on the water, a flicker of hope drawing near. But as they approached, voices echoed in the distance. "They took this way. Go. Find them." "No." Lily gasped, panic washing over her. The fear in her eyes sent a shiver down Tony's spine. He couldn't let them be caught now, not after everything they'd fought for. "Quick! Get down!" Tony commanded, ushering them behind a stack of crates. They ducked low, breaths quickening, hearts hammering as the figures swept closer. "Check under the docks. They must be close." The command rang out, and Tony felt the tightening grip of fear. He needed to protect them, he had to make this right. "I can create a distraction," Marco whispered, determination in his voice. Tony shot him a look, but Marco shook his head, a spark of defiance igniting. "Trust me. Just find the boat." Before Tony could voice a protest, Marco slipped away, shadows cloaking him as he moved toward the open dock. "No," Lily whispered, panic flickering in her voice. "We can't just," Tony urged, eyes glued to Marco's silhouette as he blamed all the years of turmoil on himself. But as Marco began gathering the attention of their pursuers, the apprehension melted into something else. "Grit. Go. Now." Marco called out, drawing more attention to himself and his daring plan. "Get to the boat." And in that moment, it became clear. Strength always found a way to shine through darkness. "Let us go," Tony shouted, urging Lily and Sam forward. Together, they dashed towards the boat, feeling the thrill of freedom on the horizon. The wind whistled in their ears, and the cold stung against their cheeks, reminding them they were alive, truly alive. With every powerful stroke toward the boat, Tony felt a surge of purpose. They hopped on board, breathless and alive with determination, ready to steer the journey of their lives in a new direction. They fumbled with the ropes as Tony finally caught the boat's engine's rumble in his chest, a sound of hope rising from the depths of despair. "Start her up," he instructed Sam while glancing back, their past still looming but not consuming them. With a burst of speed, Sam flicked the ignition, and the engine roared to life. "Go! Go!" Tony shouted, heart racing as they pushed away from the docks, glancing back as the shadows approached, their pursuers desperate but futile. Lily grasped Tony's hand tightly, their fingers intertwined like the promise he made to protect and love her fiercely. As the boat sped into the night, he could feel the weight of their past lift, replaced with uncharted futures. "We did it," Lily whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of despair, they were tears of hope, breakthrough, and triumph. Together, Tony affirmed, his heart swelling with love and pride. He gazed into the night sky, the stars shining above them as bright as their newfound freedom. Finally, they had emerged from the shadows to find light, and from this moment, they would chart their own course. As the waves lapped against the boat, it felt like a soft lullaby, a promise that they were just beginning. Their story wouldn't end here, it had only just begun. Now, as they sped away into the dark, Tony embraced the love that had turned him from ice to warmth. They were alive, together, and ready to face whatever storms lay ahead, united in their battle against the darkness. And as the horizon beckoned with the first light of dawn, Tony yelled out into the night, "We're free." And he knew this was just the start of everything great. So, if you're inspired by this transformation, this journey from fear to freedom, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for the channel and not miss the next exclusive stories that lift you up. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and spread this message of hope and resilience. Comment down below with your reactions and feelings about this ending. I want to hear what you think, and please, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Don't wait not even one more second to share. Let us keep the momentum going and build a community that thrives on love and strength.